Okay, we're going to be starting here. Got to see where I find this thing. Here we go. Give me just a sec. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Just a sec here. Let me get to my... Still learning this shit. Live.
Is my audio fine?
Yeah, your audio is good, man. Okay, let's see if we got any people here. Let's turn this on. Hey, there they are. There's everybody. Hey, everybody. We'll let a few more people get in here. I've got Michael Goldstein with us tonight, aka Bitstein on Twitter, if you guys follow him. He's the president and founder of the Nakamoto Institute. Pretty much a historian of Bitcoin.
Howdy.
Here we go. Okay, so we got tons of people in the chat. I'm just going to make sure everything's set up. I'm going to share the link right now. Okay, I always forget how to do this stuff. There we go. Hold on a sec. I'm just going to post this to Twitter. Okay. Okay, I just posted that. Give me just a sec, everybody. I just got to post this all around, and then we can get going. Just got to close all this stuff. You guys hear me still? Everything good? Yeah, they can hear us. Okay, let's get started. So I shared that all around. I want to change actually the description. I'm going to change the name of this stuff I'm doing. Sorry, almost there, guys. Give me a moment. Okay, there we go. We're all set. How's everybody doing? How have you been enjoying the last few days? Michael, can you see my screen?
I'm looking at the YouTube live stream.
Okay, so you can't see it. You're a little delayed though. Christmas was good over here. Drank too much, so. How about you, Michael? Too much meat? Too much steak?
Oh, there's no such thing.
All
I
right,
had some incredible ribeye roast.
that's lovely. No, we're not in a bull trap. So I'll show you guys what's going on. So, all right. So we've broken out, as you know. I'm just trying to show you we're currently in a bull flag, and we're literally just breaking it as I'm speaking here. So that's sort of the target I'm working with right now, about where we're going. So it's strong, and if you've been following my tweets throughout the day, I've been kind of claiming that a lot of size is entering the market now, which I think we're on ever since Future's been added, that we're starting to get large institutional participants in Bitcoin, and that's, quite frankly, one of the reasons why we're able to go so incredibly exponential on the weekly chart. I mean, there's nothing like this in history. It's insane. So we're looking good. I mentioned that I'm expecting the weekly to, in this weekly candle, to engulf last week's candle. So we'll see how it goes, though. But I'm always taking it a step at a time. So we're just working through this bull flag right now. So if you guys didn't catch it at the start, I have Michael Goldstein here, aka Bitstein, on Twitter. I added his Twitter handle in the post on Twitter. And he's the president and founder of the Nakamoto Institute. So I'm sure you guys have heard of him. He's been around the community for a long time. So we're going to talk about a few things today. So kind of want to go over the fiasco with Coinbase, because I really believe that it was a lot to do with the decline we experienced.
It's definitely quite the week for FUD.
Oh, incredible! And I find that the hardest FUD is always the Bcash fork FUD. Like when I got really started in the 5600 low on the first one there. Like I bet everything I had on that low. And I remember hearing like horror stories of people who've been in it for so long, and they sold at that point because the FUD was so intense about the flippening, right?
Mm-hmm. I saw people, selling 90% of their Bitcoins.
Incredible, eh?
It's sad.
I know. I don't know what it is about that particular FUD that just terrifies people, but I can tell you that.
Yeah, if I was a Bcash supporter, I'd probably still hold on to my regular Bitcoins just to see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the big thing out of here for me is that I mentioned a lot on my page about the BCH peg, how some consortium, some group was protecting. So Bcash was actually crashing after the Roger Ver interview. I don't know if you noticed that, Michael.
Yeah, someone pointed out you could tell on the chart exactly when the interview had started.
Yeah, because then it hit a huge pump to 4,400. I believe it was at 3,500, and then it like the most massive pump. Like if you're watching the depth charts on GDAX, it's like, where is all this money coming from? And they really wanted a good showing for Ver when he was on the interview, right? So right after that, it started to just absolutely crash. And then that's when I started to notice this peg. So I'll show it to people here. So what they were doing, this group, this pro Bcash group, they were selling BTC to buy BCH. So selling one depresses the price of BTC to buy BCH to keep it afloat, right? So it's crashing, and they're doing that. If they didn't do that, it would literally have been a wipeout. I suspect it would have been back to like 1,500, right? So them doing that really kept it afloat. So sort of the moral of the story is to me, which is exciting, is that whoever that consortium was, they've sort of naturally selected themselves out of Bitcoin, which is exciting for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the kind of game that you don't want to play unless you truly think you're going to win.
I know. And they played it hard, but then Wall Street came in on Sunday night. You saw that, eh? Because futures just opened, and the bid on spot was like dramatic, and they broke that peg then.
I think something that definitely keeps me optimistic through all of this, always, not that I would ever not hodl, but something that, keeps my spirits up is just knowing that over the past couple months, Pierre and I talked about this on one of the early Noted episodes, that Wall Street has really taken to heart the digital gold meme. So a
Totally.
lot of the people coming into Bitcoin from Wall Street are coming into it not necessarily with the payments aspect that
Hmm.
Bcash tends to focus on, but knowing that Bitcoin is going to be this expensive, scarce digital resource.
Right, totally. And it makes sense. Why would they care about payments, right? Like think of banking, think of Wall Street. They don't deal with that layer, like ever. They deal with expensive wire transfers, international settlements, things like that, large sums of money, moving money to a tax shelter. They never deal with like small little transactions. So, of course, they're interested in Bitcoin.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just going to take some questions here. So, I'm going to see what everyone's saying. Um, and that's the other thing. Bcash, so one of the big parts of the fiasco was Bcash, all the measures that were taken by GDAX to make it difficult to sell it. That blew me away, you know.
Yes.
So
Yes.
disabling the pair trade, so you couldn't, sell BCH right and go right into BTC. They've canceled that until January, right? So they've done that. So that to me is like an egregious way of protecting Bcash. And then I heard through the grapevine that so many large whales were not able to transfer their Bcash to the exchange and actually sell it. It was getting frozen. So,
Yeah.
oh,
And I'm certainly not a large whale. I wish I was, but just personally, I had difficulty getting verified on GDAX just because I think it was because of so much traffic. Like so many people were wanting to get on.
hmm
When you airdrop free money on people, they're gonna go claim it. Uh, so yeah, they were just having trouble all around. And as you touched upon in your tweets, they had problems with the unspent transaction outputs.
that's right.
That seems to be the major theory as to what's going on with Coinbase.
So let's get you to cover that if you can, because you're really good at this stuff. Because I don't think a
Yeah.
lot of people understand how this works.
Hmm. Sorry, I'm coming over a little bit of a cold. So first we have to like step back and remember, what Bitcoin transactions actually are. Basically, every Bitcoin transaction is taking prior transactions, and you can put as many as you want as an input, and you can put as many outputs as you want. And you just have to have the correct key to sort of solve the puzzle that unlocks each one of those inputs, and you can send it to an output. So the problem is if you are having to cash out to a bunch of people and you're receiving a bunch of money, when you're dealing with a lot of Bitcoins, you might end up with a ton of unspent transaction outputs. And when you want to spend them, if it'd be like imagine you had a bunch of people wanting to just withdraw a penny, and Coinbase has to give pennies to everyone, but the cost of sending that penny is obviously much bigger than a penny. So someone found that Coinbase is likely sitting on a ton of unspent transaction outputs, and GDAX pays transaction fees, and you can withdraw. I don't know if they have a minimum limit, but it's not a very large amount that you can withdraw. So because
For
of
free,
this,
right? You can withdraw it for free.
exactly. So
Right.
because of this, GDAX is put in this position where they have to cover transaction fees that are greater than the amount they even have
Yeah.
on hand in these unspent transaction outputs. So some people could see this as a problem with Bitcoin itself. People have gone on about FUD with, imagine, if you get all of this dust is what it's called when you have
Mm,
these kinds of
I get it.
an unspent transaction output that's sort of smaller than what can be spent in the first place.
Right.
Um, some people have made fun about that because if you have a bunch of those, then you effectively can't move those.
Right.
This isn't completely true though, because and I don't think this is a problem with. I mean, it's not a great thing with Bitcoin, but it's not. It doesn't stop Bitcoin because there's all kinds of better engineering you can do to handle the payments better.
Right.
So I highly recommend everyone go to Bitcoin Tech Talk and read an article by David Harding, a wonderful friend of mine and one of the best people in Bitcoin. He wrote an article about batching payments, which would basically be where GDAX, instead of every time someone says, hey, I want to take out a penny from GDAX, and they send the transaction to that person, what they do is they wait until they have a certain number of people asking for a certain amount on a certain time scale. So some may be okay with waiting a day, some may be okay waiting a week, some may want it in the next block. But any of these sort of sets of people batch together the transactions into a single payment so that the byte size, I guess this is something I didn't mention, is the transaction fee is based on how many bytes the transaction takes up. So the more inputs you have and the more outputs you have, the higher the fee is going to be.
Right.
Because you have to pay for each one. Each one of those is, however many, 140 bytes or whatever it is.
Someone gave me a good example, like take I have my donation tip jar thing, and if I get 40 donations, that's 40 UTXOs, right?
Yes.
And if I'm to move them to my other wallet, let's say, that turns it into one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to pay all those fees on those 40 is the problem.
Yeah. So what Coinbase was doing, what it seemed like, is that the way that they're handling withdrawals, for instance, is that they would do each transaction separately. So you'd have to pay, let's say $30 for each input because you're sending it to that. But you can save a lot of space in the transaction by batching them together. In which case you can, David's math was showing you can, depending on the scale that you're dealing with, you can see up to 80% improvements in transaction fees.
Yeah, but they're just
now.
Well, so why wouldn't they be doing that? Is the big question for me.
Well, my cynical thought is that Coinbase over the past couple of years has been so focused on Ethereum and tokens and all this other stuff. They've really spread themselves thin. So they've been working on Toshi, or I guess I think it's called Toshi now. It used to be Token. It's basically like an Ethereum messaging app. They're working on that. They were working on integrating Ethereum, which, by the way, when there was the Ethereum Classic fork, they also had huge problems with that.
Right.
So this isn't the first time that they've dealt with issues regarding forks, although this one's a bit different. But yeah. So they've spread themselves thin, and I don't think they've done a good enough job of focusing on the core product that they have,
right.
which in my opinion is giving liquidity to Bitcoin.
Right. So
they've been doing this since 2012. I've used them. I'm sad to say that I'm no longer going to be using them to purchase Bitcoins because I've been a customer since 2012.
Right. So they're moving towards like an altcoin market, aren't they?
Yeah, which I mean, in a sense, makes sense because the more trades that you're handling on your platform, and for each one, if you're making some money off it, then perhaps it makes sense to want just everyone trade everything so we can make money outside of that. But I think that ignores the core thing at hand, and because of that, resources have been devoted to all kinds of Ethereum stuff, and to this day, Coinbase still hasn't implemented SegWit, which in this particular case, if the UTXO problem is actually what's causing issues, SegWit wouldn't get them out of the hole.
Right.
But it would definitely be a major boon to how they're dealing with transaction fees, and especially for just people who are using the retail side, it costs, when I took some money off Coinbase, and regardless of how much you were taking off, you were going to have to be paying a good, $30 fee.
Yeah.
So, had they implemented SegWit, they would be able to save on these fees, and they could have also worked on fee estimation stuff. So, for instance, the money that I took off Coinbase, it was just, it's just some money. It's not something I don't plan on touching anytime soon because I'm hodling.
Right.
So, I wouldn't care if it would have taken 2 weeks to go through. So there was no reason to be paying a $30, $40 fee when it could have just been, a couple bucks and take as long as you need. But unfortunately, because they've been focusing on all of this other stuff, I believe that's the main reason why they haven't devoted the resources necessary to get SegWit implemented, get fee estimation, and all these other engineering stuff, one of which would have been batch payments that would have helped with the exchange. All these things, they could have had a much better platform, but they chose to go in a different direction. And
right. And
this
sorry, that's okay. I just want to say, and I hear that Bcash with its large blocks actually bails them out. It's like it allows them to be lazy, if that makes sense.
Right. That's what I've heard as well. So if you can get everyone to kind of switch over to Bcash, then you have more block space that you can you don't have this situation where the fees are greater than what you have. So because of their bad engineering, that's a way to get out of it.
Right.
I mean, the good news is that hopefully we'll see, my co-host and good friend Pierre Rochard become CEO of Coinbase. He has
we're trying to meme that into reality, right?
I mean, I already treat him as the rightful CEO of Coinbase, and we're just waiting for the crown to get delivered to him. But he has a fantastic platform. I'd have to go dig up the tweet thread, but he put out his platform for what he would have Coinbase do, and I think it is a tremendous platform, great platform. So
like I said, I don't care what happens with them because I'm starting to really believe that BTC's future is in the institutional market. Less users, but more size per user, because I think the real goal of Bitcoin is to become the international settlement currency of the world. That makes the most sense to me from what I know about economics. So I'm happy that, the $100 Coinbase model it doesn't matter to me. I don't think that's driving this parabolic trend, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I agree. And I mean, I would actually, I'd put a caveat. I would say that the international settlement platform or currency, as the goal for Bitcoin, I see that as the sort of minimum viable product.
Right.
So I want the world for Bitcoin. I'm very stoked about Lightning Network. I can't wait to see where that goes and what it does for payments. And who knows what else people will come up for with centralized and decentralized solutions for payments on the Bitcoin network. But at the very least, if we get anything else out of this, I want Bitcoin to be the international settlement currency. And as far as I can tell, that's where we're headed. And there's really nothing that can stop it.
Right. And that's what changes the world. That's what changes. Not payment, not being a Visa competitor. So let's take some questions from people here. So what's been on your mind, guys, these days? How have you found the last week? Were you able to make it through? There's a little delay, so they'll get coming here in a minute. Richard,
are we looking at the YouTube chat?
Yeah, I'll call out some questions when they come. What is your opinions on the? We don't really want to talk about altcoins, to be honest. We're maximalists, man. Could Coinbase be Mt. Gox 2.0? I would say absolutely not. They're not in any insolvency situation. It's just more of a weird defense and protection of Bitcoin Cash because, frankly, it allows them to easily manage their model. What do you think?
I don't know if I have a strong opinion on that. I don't have the same kind of doom and gloom that I do definitely remember having back in 2014. For me, it was more just a signal of I need to move on from Coinbase. I signed up with Gemini, and I'll use them going forward to
Yeah.
purchase Bitcoins. Otherwise, I'll let them handle their stuff, and once Pierre gets into the CEO position,
Right. Then
it might turn around.
we're golden. So here's a question for you, Bitstein. Which cut of meat is the best?
Ribeye, obviously.
Ribeye, obviously. Okay, hold on here. Is BTC no? Is BTC and Bcash? I'll answer this one now. Inversely related price-wise, or can Bcash hang on the coattails of BTC in the next rally? So, as I said, they were pegged very hard together. So BTC is still, or BCH is still in an uptrend, but it's nothing like Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin's amazing. So even the peg is falling. So if you were to, where the hell did this happen here? One sec. Even though Bcash hasn't come off a lot, it's if you compare it to Bitcoin, it's come off a lot. Where's my peg? Where did it go? Just give me a second. There it is. So you can see it here. You can see it was really pegged here at 0.2. This was their magic number. They were trying to peg it at 0.2, and that's like around here is the historical like high point that Bitcoin Cash can get versus Bitcoin. So what happened here as the peg falls, you see this. It's not so much that Bitcoin Cash, Bcash, was falling. It's just that it was not keeping up with Bitcoin's gains, and that's really been the story of Bcash. It hasn't really, like aside from the 2,800 high in November, it didn't really crash after. It just doesn't do anything. It doesn't perform, whereas Bitcoin does. So if you compare them together, this BCH to BTC, this pair, if you look at it, BCH is always underperforming. So let's go to another question.
I saw a good one. If the average person can no longer make a lot of money by buying Bitcoin because of fees, won't the hype end?
Well, I would say absolutely not, because we're entering a point, and this is a bit unfortunate if you can only afford buying in $100 increments, but Bitcoin is getting to the stage where it's attracting institutional money, and they're fine paying these fees. And if you really look at the way that the market works, in order to drive Bitcoin higher, sorry, I'm going to delete this silly thing I was drawing on here. But in order to, drive price through 1600, 1700, 1800, you have to be able to eat a great deal of the sell volume. And in order to do that, while keeping it going exponential, you need a great deal on the bid side, right? And $100 purchases from Coinbase, etc., are not the things that create that outcome. It's banks, it's institutions, it's Wall Street. That's what's driving us now. That's what's really accelerating us. And to be honest, if you really look, when this started, it was when, I believe it was middle of the year, when CME announced that they were going to release futures. As soon as they did that, Wall Street entered. And that's why we got like this vertical chart we're dealing with. It's not because of people like Coinbase. If there's anything you can add to that, Michael.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would like to add is that when people are hearing what you're saying, they should be sure to understand that what you're describing is the macroeconomic trend, and not saying anything specific about individual investors, because we're still in a time when any person can come jump out on this bandwagon. And so we're not saying that individuals should not be buying Bitcoin or holding Bitcoin or anything like that. In fact, this is still early Bitcoin, and I highly recommend that anyone take a look at their financials and see what kind of money they can put towards such an investment, and try to do everything they can to get in on it. Given that they're not putting themselves into debt slavery in the process. Right. So the point that we're making with institutional money is that is the macroeconomic trend. When we want to talk about what truly makes Bitcoin go from zero to international settlement currency, as much as I would love the story of it being like, all the masses buy into Bitcoin and that's what does it, ultimately it's going to be the institutions
Totally.
And the other thing I'd like to point out with that is I do notice a small trend, and I'm sure it'll become bigger over time, which is people who have been in Bitcoin for a long time see institutional money coming in, and they see that as a sort of negative signal because Bitcoin has long had a sort of anti-authoritarian streak, and it's very much be your own bank. We don't like the banks, and I don't like the banks, but I actually see this as a positive signal.
And
And the reason,
sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish
oh
that.
yeah, so the reason why is because Bitcoin is taking in institutional money within its own frame, meaning Bitcoin isn't changing one bit. The institutions are having to cave in and use Bitcoin as Bitcoin dictates rather than the other way around. If it was the other way around and people were, say SegWit 2x had managed to fork successfully, that would have been a bad signal to me. But the very opposite happened, and Wall Street is coming into our Bitcoin.
Right.
So we're winning, and so we're seeing Wall Street and the nation states and all of these large, powerful entities fall into our frame of libertarian sound money.
Totally. And I'll add this point because there's this sort of underlying thought that banks and institutions are bad, right? But if you actually understand the nature of capitalism, they're not necessarily bad. They're only bad when they're in a fractional reserve environment, right?
Yes,
When they're
absolutely.
able to manipulate the money supply. A bank serves very functional purposes, like one traditionally was storage, right? And I could see that being resurgent with, storing hardware wallets and storing paper wallets, right? They're like a vault with guards with guns. You know what I mean? Like
Storing cryptographic keys is scary.
exactly. Like you know what I mean? And that's like the Winklevoss. I just read that they have all their stored. They cut up their paper wallet and all the different keys or the different seed words, and they put them in different vaults in banks, right? And that makes perfect sense. Like you'd rather put it in like a well guarded bank rather than have it in your house, But
absolutely.
beyond that, banks also specialize in, like I said, international settlements, like sending large sums of money across and back in the world, right? That's one of their major jobs, and that's something that if we go to the Bitcoin economy, banks are still going to be around and they're going to be big players, right?
Yes.
They're just not going to have that perverted loan interest usury thing that they've been doing for the last whatever, which really got exacerbated since the 70s, right?
Yeah, exactly. The biggest crime in banking over the centuries is just this conflation between the loan deposit and the demand deposit, and treating those as one and the same. Right. And as soon as you separate them, which Bitcoin does by necessity, you simply cannot loan out a Bitcoin you don't have.
Yeah.
Unless you're using certain centralized systems, they can manage to do that, but you can't reflect that on the blockchain itself.
Yeah, and like I could imagine someone like Square coming out with some sort of centralization, your Bitcoin stored there in an accounting way, and they could technically fractionally reserve it, but I think in that case the market's going to penalize any company that does that so badly, right? Any of these centralized versions of scalability,
Yes.
So I really think we're entering a whole new world of true sound money, which is exciting. So.
Agreed. And the other thing that banks do, by the way, is once you separate those things out, giving out loans is an important thing, and I can't wait to see what kind of loan markets develop in Bitcoin, especially since it becomes more peer to peer in the sense of you get a whole new class of people who have Bitcoins and get to look at investments and give out loans directly.
Right.
I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff there. I wish Pierre was here to tell us a little more about that. But banking is not going away, and it's all the services they offer are absolutely fantastic, except for when they fractionally reserve, which Bitcoin gets rid of for all time.
Totally,
it's done.
And Bitcoin, I had a conversation a while ago with I can't remember the individual. But I had mentioned that Bitcoin will disrupt like every area of banking. Sort of like if you recall, if you ever saw that, it was an image of Craigslist, right? And it had like arrows to each thing they offered, and like someone had created an actual physical, like a platform for that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like services market or like looking for a job. Well, that's Indeed.com, right? Like and selling and buying things. Well, that's eBay, right? Or like you know what I mean? Like they broke down every part of sort of the logic of what Craigslist deals with, and they showed that the internet has created a version for everything they do. And this guy had mentioned that that's a good template for what's about to happen for banking. So take bank wires. Okay, Bitcoin is going to innovate on bank wires, right?
Yes.
Storage, they're going to innovate somehow on storage, right? What
Oh,
other
it's
stuff?
it's incredible the disruption in storage just because cryptographic keys are fundamentally different than storing gold bricks.
Yeah. Well, I
Uh,
think, and I think,
the
and I think the exciting thing which a bank can do, for me in particular, is they can provide insurance on that storage, right?
hmm
Which is a game changer. Then you're really safe no matter what happens.
Although I think you're a little too unambitious there because I don't think Bitcoin's just going to disrupt banking, but disrupt basically everything.
Yeah. Well, of
I
course.
can't think of something that Bitcoin will not disrupt,
Totally.
just because the massive shift in time preference, as our friend Saifedean has talked about so much.
Yeah. To me, that's honestly the thing I'm most excited for. I can't stand this high time preference world. Okay, let's take some more questions here. So what do we got?
Saw one that was kind of interesting. Actually, interested to hear what you think on this, and I can say it as
Okay.
well. What do you think about rogue regimes, aka Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, holding large amounts of Bitcoin?
Well, I think that's fantastic. Not because I necessarily agree with the regimes or not, but oh, this is a complicated question because you have to really get into history. I think I just, as a de facto rule, I like the idea of censorship resistance, right?
Hmm.
And if you look from an economic standpoint, these sanctions and stuff are stupid, right? Ron Paul talks about that all the time. These things are stupid and they do nothing but hurt the individual people that live there, right? But I think what it does at the core is it disrupts the system, which I love, right? If Iranians or Russian government can supersede these sanctions, it's just gonna burn the whole thing down, and I love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really puts a wrench in the whole end of history notion that
Totally.
so many people hold on to. And all of these people, I want the Iranian people and the people of North Korea and whoever else to be able to live
Totally.
free and sovereign lives.
Yeah.
And so Bitcoin helps kind of level the playing field a bit and help kind of reorganize power a
Right.
bit.
Because if the
And
government's holding it, obviously the people are allowed too. I haven't seen any sort of dichotomy where the government is allowed to use it, but the people aren't, which is
there's
nice.
there's been some interesting pumping of Bitcoin out of Iran.
I know, I've heard about that. Yeah.
People should follow Janie on Twitter, Janie Gak, Janeygak. She's translated a couple Iranian newscasts and stuff like that from Persian into English, just describing their pumping of it, and they're excited about Bitcoin, and I think that's fantastic. I don't want anyone in the world to be crippled by a socialist regime, and everything that's been going on in Venezuela has been because of manipulation of the money.
Yeah.
And so Bitcoin is the way out. And the funny thing, of course, is if you investing in Bitcoin for yourself in America with no thought about these other people, you're helping everyone around
Totally.
the world break free of the shackles of socialist monetary policies.
Totally. And I like the irony of a government in their self-interest pursuing Bitcoin to overcome oppression from other regimes, but at the same time ultimately enabling their people to do it too. I love that. That's awesome. That's like a great poetic justice, right? It's like, oh, you want to fight against America and all these other regimes that are or other governments that are keeping you down? Well, you just screwed yourself over because your people now have the power. I love it, right?
All you have to do is embrace anarcho-capitalism, and you can have it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, any more questions? We're still failing this flag line here. I've been watching pretty close. So we're bouncing around here. We're having a tough time at the 1600 level, 16,000 level. Okay, I'm going to just actually cover the whole structure we're in, if that's all right. I'll take a moment here, Michael. So why did this thing bottom? Right? I was pretty adamant that we had bottomed right around the 13 to 14. We had a little dip below, but I look at prices like how long do they exist in time? A lot of people were like, well, I called the 1100, but yeah, it was there for a cup of coffee. Like, I don't really care about prices that do not exist in time for a long period of time. So around 1300 to 1400 was the bottom. That's where it consolidated and that's where it built its bottom. But it ultimately did that because this cascade fall here, which I would argue was a lot to do with that peg. So as BCH is crashing, and it would have crashed way more, the consortium or whoever it was supporting the price was selling BTC to match it. So essentially BCH or Bitcoin, Bcash crashing, and because it was pegged by this consortium, caused Bitcoin to crash. And I really think that's the only reason we're here. So you can get upset about that, like, oh, that's bullshit, right? But really, it creates a dramatic opportunity because it took the market far beyond what would have been normal course conditions. And you can really see that in the weekly. So I'm just going to show the weekly chart here. Actually, it's the daily, sorry. So this candle, if you see it here, and this extreme distance it actually goes through the parabolic trend, which doesn't matter as long as it's, like, that can happen. You see it in stocks a lot. It just means that the market was pushed so far beyond what was normal action, it does nothing but set up a more explosive rally. And if you saw my tweets, I talked about this concept. It's called big moves lead to big moves, right? So if you push using a lot of sell pressure deep into the bids, far more than it should have gone, all you do is ultimately completely exhaust yourself, exhaust the sell side. So the bids now, when they do come back, when Wall Street stepped up Sunday, there was literally no selling in the way of it. The asks are very thin, right? If you look at the depth quotes. So it just rips through the asks, and that's why we had this tremendous day today, right? So there was no doubt in my mind that that was going to happen, given this wick here, right? And this wick. And like, these are just crazy. The market got pushed way too far because of this peg. And what the other piece of poetic justice for me is that cost, whoever did that, to push the market like that, lost millions upon millions and millions of dollars. That makes me really happy. It's one thing I'm really, as time goes on here, you're going to see anyone who's an enemy of Bitcoin and uses Bitcoin in a way of leveraging their power, they ultimately are decentralizing themselves, and they're naturally selecting themselves out of this ecosystem. And if they have 10,000 BTC, well, that's now distributed to 1,000 people or whoever, how many bought it, right? So we've decentralized them. So next time that we approach these potential points of where we have these attack vectors, they don't have the power like they used to anymore, right? So that's exciting. So this really lends to that anti-fragility of Bitcoin. That as these attacks go on, that these old OG whales who don't care about Bitcoin because they want to help, starving Africans be able to pay with things with their phone, which makes no sense because there's no capital formation in the country anyway. Anyways, I don't want to get into it. But you know what I mean? Like, these OG whales who don't see the vision, they are decentralized, or they're naturally selecting themselves out of Bitcoin, which is great for the future of Bitcoin. So where do we go from here is the question. So this attack really took us off page. It took us off the trajectory we were on. So this to me is all fake prices, and I've tweeted that a few times. This whole thing right here just sets up higher highs. So if I was to just give an example, I'm just going to do a quick price range. So the last rally, 200%. Oh no, sorry, I got the wrong one now, right? So it went the full range. This correction we had ended right there. 42%. That's no joke. And I would argue that Bitcoin is a developed market now with very, very strong depth. particularly on the bid side, right? Obviously, because it's a parabolic trend. But to take it down 42%, I would argue that's not really possible without manipulation in the modern Bitcoin market, and that's why that wick looks so weird, and that's why we're in this state. But ultimately, that creates the big move. So where can the big move take us now? So if we go from the bottom here, let's just do the 160. If you remember, the 160 was all that these used to be. So 160%, 160, it was 165 was the average. So 165% move takes us to 30,000. That's just keeping up with the standard distance that Bitcoin goes in any upwave, right? The parabolic trend is intact, as you can see. So that would be my sort of rough estimation. That's the new elevator, if that makes sense. Instead of it started here, we're starting here. So we're starting just a little, about 20% lower with it going. So we'll see that develop over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But I want to point out, I'm going to delete that stuff if that's okay, so you guys can see this better. The most important thing I'm watching for is this weekly to engulf. By that means this candle we're in gets bigger than this red one. So it would like end the week around 20,000. So we'd break out to all-time highs at the end of the week. And that would match the prior attack by Bitcoin Cash in the beginning of November. And if you look at the candle afterwards, it engulfed it dramatically. So what that would almost do, it's like, even though this was all-time highs here in the one in November, it's actually created like a base. It's like a base at all-time highs. It's really hard to comprehend, but it can only be done in the parabolic trend. So we do the same. We'd create like a base here, just under all-time highs. So that's pretty exciting. I just wanted to show also, let me go to, this is the previous attack. So same thing, we had this is in November if you're looking here. I'll go to just a little bit lighter, 6 hours. So you can see this this line of resistance, and we had like a double bottom. It's a very tight W, and then it literally goes right to all-time highs in like a V, right, or a W. And if you look at where we're at right now, so while it's more prolonged because of the 24th and the 25th, they were able to keep this peg a lot longer than it should have. So it's a bit more of a drawn-out W. But if I was to just use the last one as an example, it would be here. I'm going to use a different color, one sec. It would be like W, right? And then it should be somewhere to all-time highs around there. W bottom like the last time. And it's not that just because it's historical it repeats like that. It's because it's the parabolic trend. And we bottomed in the parabolic trend, and that's why we got so much power behind us right now. So I'll just try to draw that one more time. So something like that. And we can watch for it, right? We can see if that doesn't develop. But that should just be sort of our basic expectation. I know people are still bearish, but there's no, I mean, we just broke this high here. Anyway, so that's a good roundup of where we are, and I'm just watching again that we're in this bull flag here. And yeah, it's a tight little channel in here until we break out. See where we go. Any more questions you saw there, Michael?
Something about a bull trap, which I'm not a trader, so I have no clue what that means.
Well, I don't know. If you have a bearish bias, yes, then everything could be a bull trap. But like rule number one is to always argue for the parabolic trend even when it's uncomfortable. That's the only way that you can succeed investing this way. Like every single person, right? Like they're like, oh, it's going to 8,000, and well, that's not arguing for the parabolic trend, right?
You need the HODL mindset. You need the Chad mindset. It's all about mindset, guys.
Totally. If you don't have that rule one down, if you don't argue for the parabolic trend at the times it's most uncomfortable, that's the second part of the rule. Like when it's uncomfortable, you argue for it. When it's like that post I did calling the double bottom, and literally I got savaged by like 80 bears, you still have to make the call there. You have to still argue for it even though there's like 80 people attacking you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how you get through these points, right? It doesn't matter how many people are on your back. You just like, no, it's going higher. It's a parabolic trend. That's the only way you can survive, right? That's the only way. So if you call these bearish patterns, I think you sort of have the wrong math, if that makes sense. Like you're playing the wrong game, because the parabolic trend for the last year and a half, 2 years, has broken every pattern almost to the upside. 92% of all patterns. So if you're betting now, it's like an 8% odds. Like it's not great. You know what I mean? Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? It's like the math is not on your side, guys. Like it's not worth trying to doubt everything the trend does and doubt all the action.
I saw someone ask for a price prediction from me for the end of 2018. I usually don't make predictions, although my prediction for 2017 worked well. I said it would be 10,000 by the end of the year.
Nice.
Um, I don't have like a specific prediction in the sense of I can't see the future, but I will say the only logical next step that would make sense in this cosmic epic is 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that we could hit 100,000 before 2018 is up.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable, and I'll give an example. So since November 1st, we were at about 5,000, 5,500, and we're triple that right now, right? I don't think of Bitcoin in terms of like price, like, oh, we're at 15,000. I think of it in terms of percentage potential gain, if that makes sense. Like the last wave did 165%, or it did 200, but the other ones were mostly doing 165. So I think of what's possible in terms of percentages. So ignoring that it's 15,000 because that seems like a big number, right? Since November till now, we're up 300% or 3x, right? So
Mm-hmm.
3x from here is what, 45,000? So
Yeah,
conceivably, if we keep the same pace, within 2 months we're at 45,000. Well, then 100,000 doesn't seem so far, right?
it's just another doubling.
Exactly. And when you start thinking of it that way, these numbers make a lot of sense, right? Like it's crazy that this thing's actually doing that. Like it's crazy. Like it's causing so many experts and commentators to be like, "What the hell is this thing?" Right? Like it's got to implode. But it keeps doing these numbers, and if you keep that in mind, these projections are possible. But that said, you got to keep that hodl mindset, whatever comes your way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've learned that the number one threat to Bitcoin is attack vectors. I get that now. I get that Bitcoin is an adversarial entity. It is literally going to burn down the status quo of the world, right? And that makes you a few enemies, whether it's Chinese government, right? Or eventually it's going to be the US government. Or it's guys like Roger Ver, right? You know what I mean? Like it has all these adversaries that it needs to defeat to get there, right? And all these different attack vectors they're going to take against it, right?
Yeah, well, and
So
this system is inherently adversarial. That's why it was built. It's because you can't
totally,
trust anyone.
totally. Any more questions? What do we got here? Why do people crying? Why do people still crying eyes out saying it's going to crash to 8K after the push? So this is a common problem that happens, and this is why bears never succeed. So they make their initial call, say 13 to 12,000, and they get it right, right? But in order to be a bear, you have to be a bit more paranoid, and you have to be a bit more fearful. Like I'm talking about your emotional and psychological disposition. So then when you get to those numbers, you don't get like a courageous side out of you because you'll need it. First of all, because it is scary, right? So the natural propensity for someone who is a bear is to call more bear, if that makes sense. So they go, wow, this is moving so fast, and they think in terms of velocity and how correct they were. And then they just make another crazy call, but they don't realize that they have to actually 180 right there, which is one of the hardest things to do in investing. And they got to go from a bear to a courageous bull, and they just can't do it. So they just keep thinking in terms of more bearishness, right? And then you take the people who say bought late, the all-time highers, or around 16, 17,000. They get down to 13,000, and fear and paranoia overwhelms them, right? And they start talking about 8K not because it's possible, because it's what they fear the most, right? And people start manifesting their fear through the way that they're speaking and communicating. So I actually pay attention heavily to that, right? I call it you are the market, right? When you're when I can see the market bottoming and you have people that are actually saying like extremely ridiculous things, like extremely fearful things, I know that it's over. Because usually those people are in cash, they've sold, and now they're verbalizing how they feel, and then it rallies on them because they sold. Their actions created the bottom, and then you rally out of it.
I'd just like to point out how incredibly bullish it is that the most bearish thing that we're dealing with right now is the idea that we might go down to 8,000.
Yeah, I know, eh?
That is, that's going up what 800% over a year.
I know, it's insane. People have no perspective. It's just like
8,000 itself is a hard like having been in Bitcoin so long. 8,000 is already difficult enough to think about, let alone the 15,000 and nearing 16,000 that we're sitting at.
Yeah.
So like if it goes to 8,000, that's still you always have to zoom out on the chart. Just zoom out a little bit, and you'll stop being so bearish.
Yeah, and what would happen if it hit 8,000? It would absolutely rocket back to 12,000. Just like you see, it's this beach ball underwater concept, right? It's hard for people to understand, but I can only, and maybe I'll do a video on it. It's related to how the gym theory works. But if you literally carve out every buyer from the last wave and put them on the sell side and let them take bearish action, there's just no way you can go any lower, right? That's why markets bottom, because it runs out of sellers. It never hits a wall of buying. That's not how it works. They run out of sellers, and then it sits there in this like tepid, scary sort of place where it's like no one's really stepping up to buy because they're scared. There's really no one left to sell, but there's a lot of loud people who have sold, right? And then it sits there sort of like grinding out a bottom, and people are calling 8,000, etc., all these things. And then finally a bid comes in, like Wall Street came in when futures opened yesterday. And then it's like absolutely gone because there's no selling left. So always think of that. Always think of that it bottoms because it runs out of sellers. And if everyone's bearish like they were, we actually came up with a really funny indicator in my Discord group. It's called the PTRAV bottoming indicator. It's whenever I do a Twitter post that attracts like a mountain of gloating bears, that's your bottoming indicator. Because they only had the courage on this one to do it right when they felt like I was beaten, right? And that was around, I think it dipped below 13,000, 12.8 on the retest, and people just went to town on me, right? It was really fun. So that's the new PTRAV bottoming indicator, and I'll announce it every time it happens, or you'll be able to see it.
It's fantastic.
Isn't it
I'm actually
good?
surprised. I'm actually surprised I haven't gotten any hate when Bitcoin hit 10,000. I had that tweet that became very popular about Wall Street traders versus me, the Bitcoin trader. And I actually have not really seen since. I mean, of course, when it was going viral, I got a lot of hate for it, telling me I was hubristic and all this other stuff. But since then, I actually haven't heard about it at all. I'm actually disappointed. I've been waiting for like some kind of dip to cause people to pour in and give me the hate for being wrong about Bitcoin's future.
I know. Well, I know, but you actually said that so low. I think it was around 9,000 or 8,000. It just can't come up again, right? It's like
Exactly.
I got a comment.
If it went down to if it goes down to 8,000, I'm still up.
Yeah.
Way more than you are for the year.
Yeah. So some guy retweeted this old tweet I did, and it was because it was inspired by you, if you remember. I said, "This is real. It's fucking happening. You're all going to be millionaires." You remember that comment I made?
Yes. Yeah.
So someone called me out on it in this bear thing, right? And they retweeted it and they said, "See, you're building into the hype." And I was like, I tweeted that at 12,000. We're at 14 right now. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? It made no sense. Like, we're up from that point. How is that an argument, So it's pretty funny, this stuff, right? I had an old mentor who taught me, like, when I got in the stockbroker game, and he was this 83-year-old Jewish guy, just absolutely brilliant. And he always had this saying that being a bear is a mug's game, right? Like, you always lose when you're a bear, right? And particularly is the case with Bitcoin. Anyone who bets against Bitcoin, and that's what's funny, when you bet against a BTC maximalist, like me or Bitstein, you're actually betting against Bitcoin, and it might bite you in the ass, right? You know what I mean? Because we're sort of tied to the price action, right?
Yeah. Well, all of these bears. I think it's important for everyone to remember that newbies, when you enter Bitcoin, you're going to get a baptism by fire.
You have to.
You're going to feel like you got wrecked. But the point is, you just have to hodl
Yeah.
and give it some time. And I think I had a tweet a while back that it's in Bitcoin, if you don't like your net worth, just wait 5 minutes.
Totally. All right. Any more questions here? Let's see. Bitcoin has been consolidated for 13 hours. Should I be worried? Well, the math of the parabolic trend is the less you move, the more coiled you get. So no. Should get excited. I feel like miners control everything and make the price whatever they want. Like we are only viewers of this beautiful show and they just shake weak hands. It doesn't make any sense to me. You?
Well, I missed that.
Don't you feel like miners control everything and make with the price whatever they want? Like we are
Nope.
only viewers of this beautiful show. No, it doesn't make any sense that. The only thing they control is they can dump the coins they make from mining the block, right? They have no other power than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they can change the protocol by mining what they want. And yeah, so they can sell bitcoins, in which case the bitcoins just go into hands of hodlers, and we just keep doing what we do. So
Right.
no, I don't buy that. I mean, they do. There are some. So like Jihan Wu, he's sitting on quite the war chest. So there's plenty of various propaganda efforts that
Right.
people that are sitting on that kind of money can deal in. But it's not to the level that I'm going to be bearish about the future of Bitcoin. It's just a nice as a little drama and popcorn for this little ride we have to the moon. It'd be kind of boring if we
Totally.
just won.
Right. And these are the
Just
adversaries, right? These are
for now. For
right.
now, we'll see.
Right.
We'll see who else emerges.
We've had an adversary, like you have the government adversaries and the regulatory adversaries, and then you have like the pissed off OG whale adversary, right? Then you have the minor adversary, which is Jihan, right? They like
Mm-hmm.
every group, you need your adversary to kind of make you strong in that area. So it makes perfect sense to me. You got to go through this, right? Let's see here. Any more questions you see there?
Do you place any significance in the Mayer multiple?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Um, where I'm wondering is if it can spike like it used to in 2013. I'm wondering if that's actually possible for it to do that, because I was actually expecting it on this run. I was thinking I want to see the overshoot happen with a spike in the Mayer multiple, like when it goes up to 8, like extreme. And I don't know if that's actually possible anymore because of how long it's taken to build this uptrend. That the moving averages are always close. Like it would be like obscene to actually. So I think the historical versions of the Mayer multiple may not be valid anymore. But I think we, as a general rule, we're starting to get on average a bit higher, right? And it's revealing that we're in this really explosive part of the parabolic trend. Aside from that, I don't know if it's helpful for timing. I don't know. I don't know. Signaling, I don't know how it can help at all. Let me just give an update on the market here. So you can see where we're just look at all these dojis. We're just bouncing back and forth in this flag, right? I'm pretty like what's your BitMEX? So BitMEX was it was a little triangle here, and it's already broken out. So I expect, yeah, and look at this is Coinbase or GDAX. So it's a triangle or pennant, and these things are looking poised to break out. Probably when the Asian markets get going in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., we will break out. And we got a lot of ground to make up. They're at 19, 20,000. They didn't even correct if you look at their charts. So it's like it was just a pure manipulation thing in North America or the UK, right? With Bitstamp. I don't know where the majority of the pegging happened, but so we've got everything in place to just that W bottom like in at 5,600 to get us back to all-time highs. My personal expectation is that we're going to retrace the wick or the candle, the weekly candle from last week, and that will put us back up to these 18,000 and 19,000 levels. How much time you got there, Michael?
About 15 more minutes.
15 more minutes. Okay, let's take some more questions. We're only being an hour on tonight, guys, but I'm going to start doing this all the time. I'm going to call it Fireside charting. And I'm going to always try to have like a real unique expert in their field join me with charting, and we can kind of amalgamate everything.
Is hyper-Bitcoinization still possible in places like Venezuela with transaction fees increasing? Store of value to escape, yes, but to use to replace currency. Well, this runs into the payment versus money thing, and yes, hyper-Bitcoinization can absolutely happen in Venezuela, and I hope it does. It'll happen everywhere.
And
I don't even know why I say I hope, like it will.
and I'll add
For
this
those,
thing. And I'll add this thing. When they're not spamming the mempool, right? Like they're doing, they've totally clogged the system. Transactions aren't unreasonable, are they?
not really,
Right.
especially for the kind of stuff I have faith in people being able to figure out how to deal with the fees,
Totally. And it,
for their specific situation that they might be in.
and I saw this tweet by Whale Panda, and he was tracking SegWit implementations around the world, or something like that. I think it was. And it was showing that since was it December, but a lot since this attack, right? Because the real backlash is, hey, why don't you guys have SegWit implemented? Why don't all the exchanges have it? Why doesn't Coinbase have it? Why does nobody have this, right?
Which,
So
by the way, Brian Armstrong had been supporting SegWit 2x, so you would think that he would have implemented SegWit,
yeah.
but
So
I digress.
all these Venezuela, I don't know the exchanges there, or Zimbabwe, they just need to implement SegWit, and all the wallets need it, and it's much cheaper, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know there's been quite a few stories. I know Jim Epstein in Reason has written about it. With I think actually a lot of people in Venezuela get bitcoins via either trading digital goods, but also just mining themselves.
Right. So there's lots of
So there's
miners. Interesting.
subsidized electricity, and they're willing to mine at a loss because the bitcoins that they get for it are better in the long term than not having them. And
Yeah.
this also gets to another point that I wanted to make, which is, Bitcoin allows you to save money, which is something that you generally just can't do in our modern society anywhere. The monetary system is designed to keep you from saving money. And so in Venezuela, if they get to save money and they can keep it even for short periods of time, that saves them from so much hyperinflation in the meantime. So I think any of the transaction fees, if they're willing to mine at a loss to get their hands on bitcoins, I think they'll also be willing to pay transaction fees, and I wish them all the best of luck. It's an absolute tragedy what's happening there.
Right. And if these mempool attacks, if all these companies started implementing these things, then everything would be fine. So it's the ecosystem needs to work on itself. But I'm a really big believer that, like, when bad things happen, when problems happen, and the immediate reaction is to reassess sort of what you've created and change the rules maybe. Like, there was talk about maybe we should increase the block size because of what's happened the last week or whatever. You've heard this, right?
Yeah.
So it's always right at these points where it's important to do nothing. It's like, no, these companies like Coinbase and all these shitty guys who aren't efficiently operating, they're the ones that need to adapt to Bitcoin. And if they want longevity, they want to succeed, and they want to survive, they need to do it, right? So
yeah, before you go and
they've been dragging their heels for what, 6 months or whatever it's been, and this is now the impetus for them to change. There's big backlash, so it's perfect conditions for actually going in the right direction.
Yes. Before you try to change Bitcoin, you need to see what you can do to change yourself to deal with the Bitcoin as it is.
Yeah, it's Bitcoin is all about personal responsibility, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, what else we got? Good times create weak men create bad times create strong men create good times. Absolutely. And we're right at the ladder of that, what you said there. Creating a Bitcoin in the whole new world is going to lead to good times. See any other questions?
Uh,
So we're still just playing in this flag. It's really bouncing around. Might be a few more hours before we break out of it. It's fine though, as long as it consolidates here, it's fine.
um,
And even if it
see.
falls here, like if it falls down here, well, it's just gonna hit the parabolic trend and explode. So remember, there's an adoption army down here, and it's not just the $100 Coinbase purchases. $100,000 Coinbase purchases. It's now like 1,000, $10 million purchases because of institutional investors getting involved. So it's a whole new ball game right now. What's going on below here on the trend, the bids behind, whole new ball game.
So here's a question. How specifically do you think Bitcoin will penalize the attempts at fractional reserve?
That's an interesting question. The market's going to do the penalizing, right?
What was that?
The market will fundamentally do the penalizing, right?
Yes, I think it's good to talk about the specifics of how we might see the market penalize these behaviors. The first one is, as we said earlier, you can't fractionally reserve on the blockchain itself. So
Right.
the blockchain is completely public, and anyone can verify. Anyone could verify that that the numbers add up to what they should be.
Right.
The times that we'd have to worry about fractional reserve banking is if you're using a centralized service, and they have your balance in a
right.
their
ledger. Their ledger could be corrupted. Right.
Yes, and they can do things. However, what I see happening in the future is something that couldn't happen with any previous money. The dollar technically, but the dollar doesn't have anything backing it that would make this make sense in the first place. But it was certainly not something you could do with gold, which is to easily publicly verify any holdings that you have. So, if you wanted to audit, Fort Knox or something, you'd have to go in there and you'd have to actually count up, all of the gold bars and all of that. With Bitcoin, it's just math, So all you have to, like, I say all you have to. I don't want to make it seem like it's necessarily a very simple protocol, but we can expect that hopefully people will develop good proof of solvency type protocols, such that you as the customer of a Bitcoin institution can have full expectation that you can say, hey, can you prove that you still have the money you claim you have? And they can run the thing, they can run the audit, and they can show you a piece of data that is cryptographically verifiable against the Bitcoin blockchain.
Yeah.
And with that, it's very difficult to get away with it.
And I would argue
expectation.
Yeah, and I would argue that if a whiff of it happened, let's say it's Square that did this, right, with their Cash App. A whiff of it happened, digital bank run, right? Instant. And then they'd shut down withdrawals, and you're like, oh god, here it goes, right?
As opposed to this world where, we have to go use Chase Bank or whatever other bank, just knowing that they're doing this.
Totally. And
not really having any other choice. So because there's going to be free and open competition, which I'd actually like to say, people talk about the settlement thing, and they freak out about this world. Like, let's imagine that all we can get is sort of Bitcoin central banks. Mm-hmm. The thing is that in a Bitcoin central bank world, all it takes to start a Bitcoin central bank is to have enough capital. Literally anyone can show up and start one. And so because of that, yes, like it takes capital, but it's free and open. There are no longer legal monopolies on these services. And so there's going to be intense competition, and people can not only if I took my money out of Chase or Bank of America or Wells Fargo or whatever, who am I going to run to that isn't engaging in this?
Totally.
But at Bitcoin, the game is totally changed. You can have the expectation of them being honest. And yeah, if there's even a single whiff, you can run off to someone else, and there will always be a market opportunity for someone to offer sound banking.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's a long answer to that. Perfect.
Very exciting.
Yeah. Okay, what else we got? I wanted to show also, guys, looking at the monthly. Monthly's key here because as of last week, the monthly was decimated. So it was down to here, right? And it looked like a full reversal monthly. But we're quickly rebuilding it, and if we get up to say, I mean, on a minimum, I think we're going to go quite higher than this. Well, if we reverse the weekly candle from last week, that would put us near all-time highs. But even if we get to 17, 18, this monthly candle's perfect. It's not a reversal month. So again, don't count out Bitcoin. It will destroy your life. Okay, what else we got? Still in this this flag pattern here. Still in it. The longer we stay in it, the more it gets coiled. Okay, so question about Lightning. Centralization is okay as long as the base layer is kept decentralized. Absolutely. Care less if Lightning increases centralization at certain nodes. Just don't care because it can be for small amounts too, right?
Small, large. It's actually I'm interested to see how Lightning actually develops. You know,
Right, okay.
what people actually use it for. It's also a little bit of time off, so there's still time to see before it even comes out to the market and stuff.
Right. Here's a question here on tax selling. Well, what do you mean tax selling? You'd be selling at a gain here. So usually it's tax loss selling before the end of the year. So if someone's to do any selling, it's going to be in the first week of January if they want to. But I don't think that has anything to do with anything. The story here is Wall Street. The story is the parabolic trend. And the story is that we had a massive, unbelievable, manipulated decline that put us so deep. This beach ball so deep underwater, it's absolutely going to explode now. So, World War breaks up for whatever reason. Gold, BTC goes even more exponentially parabolic. Absolutely. Could you imagine a big war breaking out? What would happen to Bitcoin? Like individual people putting their entire net worth. Like I read a tweet about that. Like it's a new world we live in where you can essentially take your entire net worth on like a hardware wallet and escape a country or a paper wallet, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you really had to even put it on a brain wallet, what are they going to do?
Exactly.
That's incredible. I mean, just think of all the people who've had to flee. Whether it's like Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union or wherever else. Imagine being able to flee, but taking all of your wealth with you. It's incredible.
Totally. It's a game changer. What else we got? I think we're almost done here, eh, Michael?
I think so.
Okay, so yeah, we're still dogeing like crazy in this flag, so I was hoping we were going to break out and have a little party here while we were talking, but the game continues. But hopefully you guys found a lot of value in that. I think we covered a lot of really cool topics. Oh, last question here. Les Grossman. Is the rumor that Central Bank of Japan purchasing BTC, that is going to be the cool step, hey? That is going to be the step when central banks buy BTC. That's the ultimate size player, right? And someone will do it, whether it's Estonia or it's, Kyrgyzstan or like, it'll be some...
Or Bulgaria just holding on to it because they happen to take money off drug dealers.
Right.
They're holding on, what, $3 billion worth or something like that?
Yeah, totally. So eventually that's going to happen, right? So that's going to be that's the ultimate size player, right?
If any central banker came to me and asked me what to do, I'd absolutely be telling them to buy Bitcoin.
Totally. And Bitcoin has had to prove itself, right? It has to prove its anti-fragility. It has to last a long time. It has to be battle tested, and that is the key. And that's why no other cryptocurrency is going to be taken up by any major authority or any institution. You have to be long-lived, battle tested, right?
Yes.
That's the key thing. That is the key thing, and that's why they built futures around, or Wall Street built futures around Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the chosen one, and no other is going to be that way. I think that's it, though. I think we're done. I think we covered a ton. So I'm just going to put Michael's Twitter here. I think I got it there. You see that, Michael? And what's the address to your website? Just Nakamoto Institute?
Yeah, NakamotoInstitute.org. There's also the podcast, so you can either follow us at Noted Podcast, NODED, or noted.org.
Perfect. Yeah, they have some fabulous podcasts too, you guys. So yeah, that was great. Thank you, Michael. And
Yeah,
we'll be
thanks for
signing off
inviting
here.
me. Had
Yeah,
a lot
no
of fun.
problem. And I'll be doing these probably fireside charting frequently. So we'll see you guys again soon. Take care now. See you, Michael.
All right, have a good one.
You too. Bye.